Good evening, and welcome to another episode of What Nobody Told Me After 65. Well, it's your lady on the go, lady in the know, Miss Info. You have reached the Information Nation, where knowledge is shared and wisdom exchanged for the betterment of a people. Well, as I told you, my granddaughter is here visiting for a little while, and videos have been late. We've been at the beach and shopping and running around. And in one of the discussions that I had with her, we were talking about wonders of the world, some of the 7 wonders of the world. I think we're up to 8 wonders now. She knew a lot, and we were talking about different continents, and I'm just amazed at the information that a 10-year-old has. During one of our talks, I was telling her about the Chinese discovery of the Terracotta Warriors. And it got me to think, and she didn't know anything about it. So it got me to thinking maybe a lot of other people didn't either. And just because I'm a researcher, I'm inquisitive, and that's what I do, I thought today I would give you some information on things I had uncovered concerning the Terracotta Warriors and how they came about. Hang on, because this is amazing to me. Of course, you find yourself going down a rabbit hole. So much information was uncovered, but I'm going to condense it, and maybe you can do some of your own research if it piques your interest. So, talking about Terracotta Warriors. Now, how crazy do you have to think? How crazy do you have to be to think that by surrounding yourself with an army of fake soldiers and a make-believe lake, that you can ward off death? The soldiers are going to keep death from taking you out. Well, Qin Shi Huangdi. Qin Shi Huangdi was the first emperor of China. He was crazy and delusional. He buried over 8,500 terracotta statues. 8,500 full-size terracotta soldiers, complete with their top knot, their weapons, their uniforms, all made out of terracotta, which is a type of clay, because he wanted it to last. And it did. He had statues of soldiers, horses, bronze chariots, intricate birds, musicians, and even some acrobats. He had his whole kingdom lined up in an underground mausoleum. He was a brutal ruler. He governed his people under the legalism doctrine that was founded on the administration of punitive law, also known as the School of Chinese Philosophy. It applies the strict adherence to the law, the letter of the law, the ruler's law. There's nothing greater than the ruler's law. Strong state control and absolute obedience to authority. The legalists advocated government by a system of laws that rigidly prescribe punishments and rewards for specific behaviors. They believed that all human beings were intricately selfish and short-sighted, that they couldn't figure out how to get out of a wet paper bag without instructions. The people despised Emperor Qin, and he inflicted absolute power over them. He banned and burned many books that did not embrace his thoughts of legalism or his authority. And he executed many scholars, people with knowledge. Now, in 1974, quite by accident, while digging for a well, a farmer unearthed several figures. It was later discovered that this was just one part of 4 very large underground chambers containing hundreds of thousands of terracotta soldiers. The one that this farmer unearthed, pit number 1, as it was called, is the largest. It had 11 different compartments, and every compartment was filled with soldiers and horses and chariots. But he was a very forward-thinking man, and during his reign, he introduced standard currency, writing, and measurements. Before that time, China was divided into all these different areas with all these different languages, all these different types of money, ways of doing business. He combined it and standardized language, currency, and writing so that they could all talk to each other. They could all communicate. They could all do business with one another, and the kingdom thrived. He connected cities and states with advanced systems of roads and canals. And he's also credited with continuing the construction of the Great Wall. He was regarded as a military genius. He believed in massacre and destruction. He'd come in and kill everything and everybody and then burn the place down. He was all these things and more. But we have to remember that he ascended to the throne at the tender age of 13. He had to grow into his purpose and his own identity. After his father's death, his own mother began an affair with his father's former minister of state, who is believed to be his biological father. Later, he appoints this same guy as his regent prime minister. But we already know that you keep your friends close and your what? Enemies closer. This man further insulted the emperor by introducing a young eunuch. A eunuch is a guy who has no physical attributes to have sex. He was a eunuch, and he was appointed to the queen. It turns out this fellow was not a eunuch, and the queen gave him 2 sons. The emperor eventually found out, and because they were a direct threat to the throne, he killed them. His own 2 brothers. He killed them. And he spared his mother's life. But the so-called eunuch, he had him drawn and quartered. And if you're not familiar with drawn and quartered, with that term, let me tell you what it is. They tie your hands and your legs to 4 animals, usually horses. 2 hands are tied to 2 horses, 2 legs are tied to 2 horses, and then they send them on their way. Well, you can imagine what happens to the body. What a way to die. So the original guy, the prime minister, he had him banished from the kingdom for treason, and he killed himself in shame and disgrace. Now, this was the emperor's real father. I believe it was these barbaric acts that led him to his loss of reality and his connection with humanity. He just completely began losing his mind. He became obsessed with immortality. He convinced people to find the fictional and mythical island of the immortals. He wanted to find the elixir of life. It was during this time that he began to envision the immortal city of his death, his tomb. Thus, the Terracotta Army was created to protect him in the afterlife. He sent expeditions out, hundreds of young men and women who never returned. They didn't come back for fear of the consequences of failure. They knew if they came back empty-handed, he was going to have them executed. So they never came back. And it's believed that these expeditions are responsible for finding strange lands and staying there and beginning civilizations. He burned alchemists alive. These are people who are like magicians. He burned them alive as a means of testing their abilities. They're magicians. Figure out how to save yourself. Along the way, he ingested many potions and so-called life-extending medical cures, one being liquid mercury. Ingested in large quantities over time, it will eat away at your brain, to include your ability to reason and remain sane. The 7,000 people that were used to create his death kingdom, or his mausoleum, or whatever you want to call it, were mostly the people he'd imprisoned, and they never returned. They went out to go do a job and never came back. He didn't let them come back. He had to kill them because he was afraid that they would disclose his plans and disclose the whereabouts of his tomb. He died at age 49 from the effects of ingesting liquid mercury. He thought he was living, and he was taking years off of his life. I don't even want to tell you the kinds of things that happen to you for ingesting mercury. It is highly toxic. Now, they know where his tomb is because it was located around these pits, but they are afraid to unseal it because of the effects of mercury. So they know where it is, but they can't open it. Perhaps we will never see the exquisite artistry of a full city that entombed an emperor and his entire court. I mean, they said there were jewels on the ceiling. He had an actual river running in this kingdom filled with mercury. Can you imagine? I don't think I can. Well, I appreciate you indulging my curiosity, and I hope you learned something today, because you don't know what you don't know. Take care.